Hey guys, hope you enjoyed this interview with the Mustard Seed Catholic Worker House. Please state your first and last name for the camera.
Frank Kartheiser.
So, will you kind of tell people a little bit more about how you got into the Catholic Worker movement?
Sure. I grew up in Chicago, and I came out here to go to school. I went to Holy Cross College. And my big goals going to college were to play football and have fun. And that was going pretty well in 1968 when I got up there. Um, but I was unaware of what was going on in the world, I have to say. I mean, I knew about the civil rights movement, I knew about the feminist movement, I knew of them, but not really focused on that, just thinking about myself and hanging around on a hill in Worcester, Mass. Um, and then I started to learn more about what was happening just through being at the college and the young men. It was an all male college then, what those guys were thinking about and talking about the Vietnam War and learning more just about what was happening in the world. And back then, the Vietnam War was so impactful that everybody knew somebody who had died, who had lost their life there. We all knew somebody, some family. And so I learned more and more about what was going on in our country and realized that it wasn't the wonderful America that I had been learning about. I always thought of us as we were the guys with the white hats, we were the good guys. And learning about what was happening to people in our country who didn't look like me was a big lesson. And so I started to get more and more involved in the community in Worcester here, learning about what was happening. And I decided after a couple of years of school that I wanted to drop out. I didn't want to be hanging around on a hill in Worcester going to school while guys my age were dying in Vietnam. 58,000 guys died in Vietnam. And I wasn't going to spend my time going to college while that was happening. So I left school, started to work in the community, and it was great learning about different opportunities that I had and programs that were here in the city. And then I decided I needed to go deeper, about making more of a commitment. So, with a friend of mine from Holy Cross, Sean Donovan, and the woman who became my wife, Brenda Norton, we decided to open a Catholic Worker House of Hospitality. So we opened a storefront over on Pleasant Street. I remember the first or second day that we were there, Sean came in and he said, "We're going to call it the Mustard Seed." He said, "The Mustard Seed." This was back in the 70s, 1972. And I said, "That sounds like a hippie boutique. Doesn't sound like a, what are you talking about?" He said, "No, we're going to call it the mustard seed after the biblical quote that if you have faith as a grain of mustard seed, nothing will be impossible unto you." And so that's how we got the name. And people started to come in. People just started knocking on the door and coming in and putting the coffee on and then meals. And it just kind of grew from that experience of just kind of being there. The neighborhood we picked at the time, Pleasant and West Street, that corner, there was a lot going on, at that point. And we thought by being there, we could learn about what was happening, but also help out in some kind of way.
Hmm. And speaking of helping, what are some of the services that the Mustard Seed provides?
So from our first days, we as we invited people in, people would say, "Well, get some coffee. We got to have coffee. Then get some food." So we kind of played it off what we were learning that people were interested to have us do. So we started out with coffee and with the meal. Then people wanted clothes. Why don't we get some clothes in here? And we had a little kitchen set up there. It wasn't kind of official because the landlord wasn't crazy about it, but we could get a big pot of soup from someone and put it up on a radiator or something. Um, And then toiletries. I mean, just the day-to-day kind of stuff, and mostly companionship. So we had every Friday night we had clarification of thought. So we followed the typical program that we knew about the Catholic worker, and that was working out great. We were there for about a year, and then someone threw a cigarette butt in a trash can and started a fire. Well, that was just what the landlord wanted to kind of throw us out.
Mm.
So he, uh, we got kicked out of there. And it was odd because at the time there was a family up on Grafton Hill in Worcester, and they were selling little mustard seed keychains and necklaces. I guess these were popular back in the 50s. And they would, I guess they buy them for 10 cents and sell them for a couple of bucks. Anyway, this family on their own raised like $3,500.
Mm.
And that happened to be the down payment on the three-decker that was here on Piedmont Street. So we could put the down payment on the house and move everything over here. Very fortunate.
And what are some of the services you kind of provide today?
It's pretty much a similar, calendar. We have a meal at 5 o'clock every day. So people start getting here around 3:30 or so. So a little chance to connect and stuff like that. Then a meal at 5 o'clock. We have toiletries downstairs and in the cabinet over here. So people come up for socks, for some clothes, but also toiletries and things like that. We started a food pantry, I don't know, a few years ago. So every Tuesday night, unfortunately, there's, I'd say, 150 families coming to the food pantry. And I say unfortunately because, in the richest country in the world, we shouldn't have to have a food pantry or a soup kitchen for that matter. But we offer those, and we have clothing. We started, so there, the mustard seed is 50, whatever it is, 53, 54 years old. And we've been focused mostly inside this building. And being here in this neighborhood for so long, we felt like it'd be important to connect outside the building, to do a better job connecting with our neighbors. So about 5, 6 years ago, we started a summer program for youth in the neighborhood. It runs for the month of July. Most of it is, fun stuff and field trips and going places, but we also do some academics and things like that. But being in touch with the kids in the neighborhood help us connect more with the families. So we've been doing that bit by bit. Just some of our guests live here in the neighborhood and have for a long time. Some of our volunteers live here and they've done that. So we have some deep roots there, but just trying to connect with other families that we might not know. The neighborhood is, or has been, pretty transient. And so that's been somewhat difficult in that you might get to know a family and then they move to a place that has cheaper rent or something like that. So, but, being here that long is pretty impactful, obviously.
Mm. And what are some of the struggles of this Catholic Worker House in particular?
For us, a part of the struggle, I don't know if I would call it part of the struggle, but I think for us, we've been thinking more about, the what we do around the works of mercy, but also the works of resistance and kind of what's happening in our country with the funding for the military, the wasted, money on armaments and things like that. So thinking about how we can have an impact there. It's great to have an impact in the neighborhood, but what's our reach beyond that? We're very lucky that, Yeah, we have another Catholic worker house in Worcester, St. Francis and Therese Catholic workers. Scott and Claire do a great job on the political side and help us to broaden our thinking about what's going on there. Um, but in terms of other challenges, I think one is just how do we not see the line at the soup kitchen get longer, but how do we shorten the line? How do we help out? And I think that's been part of the food pantry, part of the other stuff that we're doing, not to see the line, the soup kitchen line grow, but to see it shrink.
Mhm. And I'm aware that Dorothy Day and Peter Martin have not set an exact straight arrow. This is how you run a Catholic worker house or farm. But how would you say you guys kind of follow some of the teachings of Dorothy Day and Peter Martin here?
Yeah, I think the way you see it as like the meal, the kind of the basic, I think has been there. And then what I was just talking about in terms of acts of resistance, I think that's where now we're focused on trying to follow in their footsteps, how they did that kind of resistance work and the importance of nonviolence as we're doing that. And um, those struggles aren't any easier now than they were then. It's probably worse. And how do we, as a small entity here, feel like we're able to have an impact? I think that's important for us.
Hmm. And I know that it's a relatively common theme throughout Catholic worker houses to do some sorts of protest or demonstrations. What are some, and I know it's also uncommon for everybody in the house to be doing anything at the same time, right?
Right, right,
So, what are
right.
some demonstrations or protests that you personally feel is important, and how do you see that relating to the community?
So again, because of our connections with Francis and Therese, we're also connected to the Catholic Worker House in Hartford. So there's a lot of good broader connection. So one of the things that we've been thinking about is just right down here in Connecticut, they're building the next age of nuclear submarines carrying nuclear weapons, the Columbia line. And so those are being built in New London, Connecticut. So we've been going down there for just demonstrations, just rallies outside the gate. And some of us being able to get arrested just to raise up the issues about what's happening there. We're spending $16 billion, I think, per submarine, and that's without the armaments and everything else. And all you can hope is that, it goes to the bottom of the ocean and sits there and doesn't do a damn thing. But we know that's not, once you build a dozen of these, they're not going to just be sitting around. So that's important to us. And it's something where the Catholic worker houses in New England can have an impact.
Hmm. And how do you see nuclear disarmament relating to poorer communities and assisting with them?
Yeah, you know, the money, the amount of money that we're spending on these weapons, billions of dollars that, we could redo this, feed everybody in the country with this kind of money that's going there. And so I see it as a big waste of our tax dollars, that it's not helpful. It only brings us closer to, the end of our planet as we know it. And to me, it's a waste. And so for us to take action on that, it can seem thin, I mean, doing work here in our community here, I think we can feel like we're having an impact on what's going on. But getting arrested down in Connecticut and the size of these budgets, it can seem unimportant or minuscule. And I think, you know, not for all of us who are working here, but for most of us, how do we have an impact? Where does it fit? And how does it fit into our broader lives? Is what we build our community around, thinking and helping each other out.
Hmm. And how would you say that this Catholic worker, is it house or community for this Catholic worker?
They,
House.
we call it house and
Okay.
community.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mustard Seed Catholic Worker House.
Okay. Yeah. How would you say that this Catholic worker house in particular follows the path of Jesus and his teachings?
I think I think we stumble along. We don't always do it very well, but Jesus left a pretty clear message of how we care for one another, and the ways that we care for one another. And we try to find opportunities to do that. But I have to say, the mustard seed, and I don't think any Catholic worker, we don't have any paid staff. You know, we're just trying to build that sense of community that you were talking about, and we're everyone comes. People seem to come with a certain kind of energy. They pick up energy from us of what we're already doing, but they also come for their own interests. And for me anyway, it's important to be open to their interests because that's kind of like what you're saying. That's kind of Jesus coming to the house and leading us to take up another direction, to be a part of something else. And so we welcome the volunteers, not just for dinner, but to share in what their interests are and what their energy is about. Worcester's also home to in a broad way, to about a dozen colleges. And they're all like 3,000 to 6,000. They're not big, but they're very impactful. And students are always coming here and helping out. And hopefully, we're agitating them around what's going on and get them to think about where they want to put their energy outside of academia.
Mhm. And what are some of your personal favorite parts of the Catholic and of being in the Catholic worker?
Well, the most exciting parts are probably, I didn't, when I came out here to go to school, I wasn't thinking, I didn't know about the Catholic work, or I'd never heard of it. And so I was very fortunate, a professor up at Holy Cross, Dave O'Brien, and his wife, Joanne, to be able to meet them and to learn about the Catholic worker uh, movement. And then so many people, Mike True, there were other professors, other colleges who'd been at this stuff for 30 years. So for me, it was just Worcester's always been just a great entrance into what the worker is, but also what the movement could be and the different aspects of it. And having folks like that who are already here um, just gives us, I think, the energy and the excitement to think broadly about what we're doing.
And if you kind of had one message to give to people, what would that be?
Hmm. Hmm. I think you kind of hit on it in your uh, question there. How do we follow Jesus at this point? What does that even look like? For me, as I was saying, when I was learning about what was really going on in this country, I kind of lost my future. I was thinking, oh, I'll go to grad school and then I'll go to corporate America. I kind of had this stupid little path. And when I learned about what was going on, I lost my future. And so the mustard seed filled that void. It kind of gave me a life that I felt was important, was doable. You know, I learned about nonviolence and the value of that, personalism, putting your body on the line. So that was like a resurrection for me to have a new path that filled where I was headed. And it was completely different from the one I had imagined. And so it goes to your thing. If we're going to follow Jesus, it's going to take us to places we never imagined, or at least I never imagined.
And do you have any more information that you feel is important for people to know about Mustard Seed Catholic Worker or the Catholic Worker community as a whole?
I think the ones I mentioned about the Catholic worker, the nonviolence, personalism, uh, it would be important to know the aims and means of the Catholic worker. I think those are all valuable. But I think at the bottom, at its root, it's your sense of how do you want to be in this world? How do you want to live? What's your path? What's your journey? And I think thinking about that and thinking about following Jesus gives you doors that open and opportunities to be part of communities that are thinking about this and working on it. And then it's not one path, it's not one effort. That's the diversity of it that's been exciting. And for us, like we're saying, just here in Worcester, that gives us a lot of opportunity.
Mhm. All right. Well, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Riley.
Hey guys, hope you guys enjoyed this interview. If you did, make sure to hit that like button. If you'd like to see more content like this in the future, please make sure to subscribe and notify. If you'd like to share this to any of your friends or family, just go ahead and hit that share copy link button. Have a blessed day.